All right, it is Thursday night. It is 7 o'clock. So you know what time it is. My name is Gino D'Angelo. I am your host for the next hour or so, where we talk about everything Northern Michigan, real estate related, and really just Northern Michigan in general. A lot of these conversations on these lives often go down a path where they don't always have a lot to do with real estate, but they always have a lot to do with Northern Michigan. So as always, if you're watching this live, which a lot of you do, or if you're watching the replay, which even more of you do, drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from, how long you've been watching for. We're getting into spring now. I started doing these lives in the dead of winter, and it's just really interesting for me to see how much different just preparing for the lives have been. Meaning, usually when I'm done, it's dark outside. Now it's fully light. I used to have a ton of time before these. Now we're getting so busy that I actually had to leave my son's. My son is making the big decision. He's in 5th grade and he's going into middle school. And for those of you that follow me closely or know me, my son goes to Petoskey St. Francis. It's a private Catholic school across the street, just about across the street from my office. We've loved having him attend there. I think it's given him a great education. It's given him, a religious foundation, which, I'm not really allowed to talk about religion in real estate. But now he's got to decide. A lot of kids. So Petoskey St. Francis goes from DK, which is pre-kindergarten, all the way up to 8th grade. Now, what I learned this year is at the 5th grade level, a lot of those kids, or some of those kids, or a portion of those kids, I guess I don't know, every year is different, leave St. Francis and go to Petoskey Middle School, as opposed to just waiting until they're done with St. Francis and going in high school. So I had a open house tonight. It was from 5:30 to 6:30. So I thought, perfect. It's 5:30 to 6:30. I'll get done at 6:30 and have time to collect my notes, review my notes, get ready to talk to you guys on the live. And at about 6:45, they were just wrapping up. And I'm very fortunate that the school is across the street from here, because I made it back just in time to grab a strawberry Waterloo, turn the cameras, turn the lights on, and get ready to talk to you. So super excited. This is my favorite end of the week. Thursday night beats Friday night because I get to talk to you about all things real estate, answer your questions, let you know what's going on up here. We've talked about everything this winter. We've talked about the ice storm. We've really, even when I go back and review my notes of the things we've talked about this winter, it seems like every week I come on and I have an update of, this is happening in the market, or we're seeing this change. And when I started these lives, I was really curious how they would go. I didn't know if you guys would care, if anybody would watch them, but it seems like every week they get more and more views and more comments and questions, and people reach out to me. So I'm going to continue doing them throughout our busy season, which will be a challenge, but I'm up for it. And I feel that these lives, if you watch them live or watch the replay, are going to be a great way to keep a pulse on what is happening in the Northern Michigan real estate market. Because just as we talked 2 weeks ago, we had the major ice storm, or maybe 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Last week, I told you there were still people without power. I think as of this recording, which is April 17th, I think there's a handful. Emmett County released a report that this ice storm was so bad that there are still about 86 people in Emmett County that do not have power, and it's been well over 2 weeks. I half joked, maybe this isn't funny to them, that they should start a Facebook group, because they are the survivors. Those are the tough ones. So Ian said, I read that Seth Godin book on yourself a year ago. I think that your suggestion, I should read it again. Yeah, Seth Godin's book. Sorry, Seth Godin is one of my favorite authors about all things marketing. He doesn't know me. I don't know him other than through his books, but this is a great book. He's got a lot of great, just practical business books. I've always been a big reader. So if you ever need a book recommendation, I'm your guy. Don't forget, drop your comments, questions. We're going to talk about tonight is Northern Michigan. Is it still worth it in 2025? So much has changed in the last 5 years, 10 years about living in Northern Michigan. Does it still make sense? Who does it make sense for? Through this video and other marketing avenues, we get a ton of people that reach out to us about relocating to Northern Michigan. So I'm having this conversation multiple times every day about people that want to relocate to Northern Michigan. And look, a lot of them do. Some of you are probably watching this. We just put one under contract a couple of days ago from somebody that found me on YouTube, which I greatly appreciate, of course. So we're having a lot of success, but I'm going to be honest with you, because that's why you come here. I like that on the lives. I mean, I'm honest on the everyday videos too, but on the lives, we can have more of an open and honest conversation. Northern Michigan isn't for everybody. And my job is in my attempt, or what my goal is when I make this content, is to try to help you figure out in the most painless way possible, is Northern Michigan right for me? Is it too expensive? Is it too seasonal? Is it, are there not enough amenities? Do they not welcome newcomers? And I want to assume, if you're watching this, a big part is maybe you just want to see me talk, or maybe you want to actually learn about what Northern Michigan's really like, because maybe you haven't been here. Maybe you're thinking about visiting. And of course, as we get closer to spring, we're having more and more conversations. So first and foremost, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. If you are watching this and you are not yet subscribed, please do so. We went from under 500 subscribers a year ago to over 1,500 now. And I'll be honest, this is probably never going to be a giant channel, because I work in an area, or I sell in an area that's not super populated. I've got friends that do a lot of YouTube content, and they're in Orlando or they're in Atlanta, and they've got tens of thousands of followers, because there's just so many more people in that area. And I think that's what makes this channel special, is it's more intimate. We get to know each other. I've met a ton of you. I feel like I know a lot of the subscribers personally. You guys leave comments. It seems like the same few people. So if you're a repeat watcher, if this is your first time, drop a comment. Let me know if there's anything you're wondering about Northern Michigan. These lives are for you. I always come on with an agenda of information that I think is going to be helpful and useful to anybody interested in Northern Michigan real estate. But I may be way off base. It might be, there might be something on your mind. And look, if it's on your mind, it's probably on somebody else's mind. So feel free to drop a comment. The first thing we're going to get into when deciding if Northern Michigan is right for you are home prices. Since 2020, home prices have doubled. Now, that was right around the COVID time. One of the good litmus tests we use for how much a house costs. There's a couple of statistics that I watch. One, it's what does an entry-level house cost in an area? An entry-level house in Emmett, Charlevoix, Grand Traverse County, which are the three big counties up here. We cover a few more. In case you're wondering, if you're watching this, wondering where we go to Sheboygan County, Emmett County, Grand Traverse County, Antrim County, Otsego County. I'm about to list a house in City-Annis for some friends of mine. So that is Mackinac County across the bridge. We don't go up there a lot, but definitely go to that market. In most markets, if you're looking at I-75, west of I-75, which covers Petoskey, Charlevoix, Moine City, Traverse City, an entry-level house there, I would say you can get away with $300,000. It's probably going to be closer to $400,000 or $500,000 if you're picky with, an updated house, the size of the house. That is an expensive entry-level house. So we look at, when we're determining the viability or how expensive the market is, we look at how expensive the entry-level homes are, because that's a way a lot of people enter the market. Something else that we also look at is, what does $500,000 get you? Now, when I was a kid, and I don't know if you were like me, I thought a $500,000 house growing up was like a mansion with a swimming pool, probably had a gate, maybe a butler, certainly a Ferrari in the yard. And unfortunately, as time has passed and I've become an adult, by age only, I have found that $500,000 in some markets, there are people that come to me with their list of criteria and they're first-time home buyers, or they're just entering this market, and that $500,000 is what it costs to get them the house they want. Even some fixer-uppers in downtown Petoskey, downtown Traverse City, downtown Boyne City have that price tag. Now, what's nice about buying a $500,000 fixer-upper, if you can justify it or you can afford it, is you can usually, that if you're buying a house that's $500,000 and it's a fixer-upper, the reason that it costs that much is usually there's a really good location, or there's a premium on the location, which allows you to add a ton of value into the home, making it, worth $1 million or maybe even more. So that's just food for thought. What we're seeing, and Ian will chime in because Ian does a lot of our mortgages, almost all of them, I'd say. We are starting to see my last 3 deals, which we've sold 3 houses recently as we get into the spring market. Those are buyers. So 2 of them are buyers. One of them was a listing we had. The 2 buyers got tremendous deals, meaning they made offers that I thought were going to get countered that actually got accepted. A friend of mine wrote an offer on a waterfront house up here today, and wrote what I thought was a really low offer just to see what kind of response we would get. And the listing agent called me, knew the listing agent pretty well. He said, they're taking it. they're taking it. But here's the caveat: they're taking it, but they didn't want to clean any of the stuff out. There's some old furniture. It was an elderly lady that was selling it, and in an attempt to make her life easier, which I think is great, she said, "We will take your lower offer, but we are not. I'm never coming back to this house. So whatever's there is there, and life will go on," which I thought was more than fair. So I called my friends, and if you're watching, I hope you don't mind me telling the story, and told them, I said, "Hey, I'm not going to use his name." And he said, "Hey, Gino, what was her counter?" And I said, "You're never going to believe this, but they took it." So now he's going into this house with a $20,000 or $30,000 budget surplus because he paid way less for the house than he thought. And even part of him was like, "Man, I don't even at this price, I don't even need to do a home inspection," which is the first time I've had anybody say that. Coincidentally, on the other side of the coin, I had a house listed. It was an expired listing, which if you're not familiar with real estate lingo, expired listing is was listed with somebody else, came off the market. That is a type of business we prospect because I think um, those are people that want to sell, have raised their hand to sell, and maybe sometimes they just need a little better guidance. So it was listed at a higher price with another agent. We dropped it considerably, which is where my market analysis came in, and I thought we were going to be fine. And this is where I think who you were. I'm not the only good agent in Northern Michigan, so I never want to say that, but I am a good agent in Northern Michigan. And I think this is where having a good agent comes in handy because, or it not even comes in handy, is super important because you need someone that knows the market to this extent. And here's what I'm going to tell you the story. You put your house on the market that first week, unless you're priced completely wrong. If you're priced at all correctly, meaning you're within the margin of what the market's going to tell you the house is worth, you're going to get a flurry of activity. Now we did an open house, a bunch of people came through, had some showings, and then we got two offers. One was very low, tried to work with them, didn't work out. The next one was lower than they wanted, but respectable. We counted a little bit and they took it. And my guidance to them was, look, we got through that first wave of new to market or, new to market with a new price activity. And I said, look, we don't have any more showing scheduled. I don't want to get into a situation where a month from now, and this is where you sometimes have to give your clients hard advice that they don't want to hear. I said, I don't want to put you in a position that a month from now, you're like, shoot, we should have spent this. We should have taken this offer. It's something to consider if you're watching this because you're a seller or look, if you're watching this because you're thinking about selling in Northern Michigan and you want to get to know me, great. Happy to have you. If you're watching this, I find that even though you're coming to me as a buyer, you're likely going to be a seller on the other side. Most people that come to Northern Michigan have to sell a house before they can move here. So I want to make sure I'm giving seller advice as well, because that's sort of the first domino that allows you to move here. It doesn't take long on a $400,000-$500,000 house to eat up five or six, $10,000. And what I mean by that is when you're selling a house, you're trying to do two things. You're trying to maximize your equity because you bought the house as an investment, and I want you to get as much money out of it as possible. But odds are, if you have a mortgage, or even if you don't have a mortgage, if you don't have a mortgage, you certainly have a property tax bill. When you start talking about owning a house and stuff breaking, $5,000 to $10,000 goes quickly. And if you turn down an offer over $5,000 and a month passes, you probably were better off to take that offer than to hold out for a little bit more. And that's the advice that I constantly give my clients. So got a couple DR Detroit, one of our regulars. Thank you so much, DR. I love the Bronco. I've actually been looking at those. Do you have a Bronco? If you do, weigh in, let me know if you like it. Florida is getting hammered. That's interesting you say that, because I've got a friend that's in Orlando that has told me that the market is coming back. Are some areas of Florida coming back, or is this just across the board? Alex Eicher. Alex is somebody who I recently met that is with Talent Title Agency in Traverse City, Michigan, which title work is, they're the ones that make sure there's no liens on the property. Title really has two functions. One, they make sure there's no liens on the property. Two, they pay everybody. I mean, they pay off the mortgage, they pay the taxes, they pay the realtors, they pay everybody. So happy to have Alex on here. Alex is really doing a really good job with a lot of media and marketing, and that's how we got connected, because I think that there's some things he can help me with and some things I can help him with. So Alex, thanks for watching. Glad to have you. DR Detroit says, I think coastal mostly getting the worst. Do you have give me a couple towns that you think are doing poorly? Because I like to keep an eye on what's going on in the market. So Insurance issues and HOA fees mostly. It's funny you bring up HOA fees because I just had this conversation. We have some people looking at condos here. And I think sometimes, specifically in Northern Michigan, HOAs get a bad connotation because, like in Florida, I don't know what DR is referring to as far. I mean, obviously, I know what HOA is, but I don't know what their fees are down there. My guess is some of them are pretty expensive. The HOA fees in Northern Michigan, there's some that are expensive. Bay Harbor, Birchwood, someplace in Traverse City that have higher HOA fees. But typically, what we find in Northern Michigan is the higher the HOA fee, it's just the HOA fee is just you pay X to get X, meaning it's just you're buying value. Meaning if the HOA fees typically high, that means it probably comes with a boatload of amenities. Now, like for instance, in Bay Harbor, the trick you have to figure out is are the amenities worth it to you? Do you want to pay $20,000 a year to have a private clubhouse with a jacuzzi that only you get to use and the ground's perfectly manicured? Some people say yes, some people say no, and that is part of the decision-making process when you're buying a house, not only in Northern Michigan, but anywhere. The second thing that is affecting the Northern Michigan market in terms of whether you should buy here or not is the Airbnb and short-term rental effect. 5 years ago around COVID, if I'm talking too loud on the mic, we got this really cool mic a couple of months ago, and I feel like sometimes I talk too loud in it, so bear with me. There is no more volatile sub market in Northern Michigan than the short-term rental market, meaning during COVID. So prior to COVID, there was sort of always like some underlying demand about short-term rentals. There were people that wanted to do them. In fact, there are people that got into them early that are doing very well with them, meaning they got in they were able to buy at, 2015 prices, which 2015 compared to, 10 years later, I mean, those prices have doubled or even better, specifically in, on the water. So if you bought a house in 2015 and you've enjoyed short-term renting it, you're probably doing very well. So there's sort of a couple things in the short-term rental. There's one, I think it's romanticized. I think a lot of people like the idea of owning a house up in Northern Michigan on a lake or in the country or a condo or whatever that they can rent out and let somebody else pay their mortgage, which sounds awesome. There's this, remember the old saying, sounds good, doesn't work. It works, but it is a job. And oftentimes when you invest in real estate, and I've invested in real estate, every type of way you can invest in real estate. I've wholesaled, I've flipped houses, I've had short-term rentals, I've had long-term rentals. Unless you're putting money into a REIT, which is like a real estate investment trust, which is very similar to putting it in the stock market, which I mean, it is putting it in the stock market. That's about the only way real estate's ever going to be passive. And the short-term rentals, whether it's short-term rentals, whether it's flipping, wholesaling, whatever, that often becomes a low-paying job. Now, there is a segment, a very small segment, but there's a segment of the world that loves the short-term rental journey. They love the process. They love dealing with the guests. They love fixing stuff. And for those people, short-term rentals are perfect. Then 2020 hit, and everybody, as the work from home craze, and everybody that was stuck in houses in metro areas came up north, and they were able to buy these houses at low market values that they were able to rent out, and the numbers just made sense. Now, fast forward till it seems like I remember back 21, 22, I'm talking 2021, 2022. I swear we get a ton of buyer calls. Half or better were people that wanted a short-term rent houses. And look, we actually started a short-term rental management company. It's called 231 Vacation Rentals. Look us up. We don't market it a lot. We really just try to keep it in-house for our private clients. Meaning if you buy a house from us and you want us to vacation rent it, we will do that for you. We don't really promote it yet. We just like to keep it as almost like a private client service, which has worked out well for us and our clients. So it was like a boom, and that lasted for a couple of years. And then two things happened. One, interest rates went up. Two, property values went up. Three, the market became oversaturated. And I was at a short-term rental meetup about a month ago in Grand Traverse County, which is just one of the counties we cover. It's one of the bigger counties, but it's just one of the counties we cover. Went from 1,200 short-term rental units to 8,000. Now that moves the needle when you're talking about supply and demand. And that is certainly going to affect price. And what we're seeing are a lot of the people that want to stay in short-term rentals. They're not just looking for a hotel room alternative. They're looking for an experience. And I think I've met a couple of short-term rental owners that really do a good job of creating the experience, meaning they have every amenity. There's a house that has a hot tub, a sauna, every video game system, a pickleball court. That's not, you're not just competing with a hotel room at that point. You're trying to attract a family that wants, or a group of families or a group of people or whoever that want to stay in a big house and enjoy all of these things together. So the short-term rental craze, it's been a tale of two markets, in the sense of it sucked up a lot of inventory a few years ago, and now we see a lot of houses that are coming back on the market that were once short-term rentals that are no longer short-term rentals, and that's been very interesting to watch. So again, if you're hopping on live, my name is Gino D'Angelo. I'm a local Northern Michigan real estate agent. I make these live videos every Thursday at 7 to interact with you, answer any questions you have a conversation about what's going on in Northern Michigan, whether you live in Northern Michigan and you're just trying to figure out what's going on with this crazy real estate market. If you live elsewhere, or you live considering relocating to Northern Michigan, I'd love to be your resource of choice when the time comes. If you're not yet subscribed, it would mean the world to me to subscribe. If you think there's anybody in your world that would benefit from these videos, share it with them. Just click on the link, share it. I've had a lot of people do that, and I've met a lot of people that their friends shared it. Now I know them as well. So I really appreciate that. And of course, as always, I appreciate the support, because there is a small army behind these videos. It's not just me sitting in front of a mic with some bright light shining on me. There's a few people that help me behind the scenes that put a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and effort into the content, and to make sure that we are doing our part to bring as much value to these videos to help you become the most educated you can possibly be about Northern Michigan real estate. So again, thank you for watching. Drop a comment. If you're hopping on late, let me know where you're watching from. I love to see where we're reaching, and it's just kind of fun to see where you guys are at. Seasonal towns, another thing that's changing about Northern Michigan are seasonal towns. Seasonal towns are becoming year-round communities. We're seeing this a lot in Traverse City, a lot in Petoskey, a lot in Gaylord, a little bit in Boyne City, Charlevoix, but with remote work, which we'll get to in a minute, which remote work always seems to be an underlying story about any topic we talk about. So it's been interesting. Are building costs coming down at all? Renovation work, not necessarily new home build. I don't believe they are. I'll be honest. I had a client who was looking for a house that they watched me. They came through YouTube, so they might even be watching. They were waiting for a builder quote, and they were expecting the bid to come back at $400,000 or $500,000. It came back at $900,000. Now, let's put a pin in that for a second and think about builders book like 2 years in advance. So meaning the jobs that builders doing now are stuff they booked when the market was ripping. Now that the market is cooling a little bit, I'm curious if the next year, maybe the next after, if you can find people that are able to do build or do renovations at a much lower price. I really think it depends also on the level of renovation you want. We have the builder above us builds beautiful homes. We've got remodelers, we've got handymen, whatever you need, we can certainly help you with. But again, DR said with the tariffs, not to be political, but the tariffs are going to raise that cost. My guess is I'm not political. I watch the news and I try to pay attention. It's hard to believe that the tariffs won't cause building supplies to go up, at least in the short term. So definitely something to watch. John, thanks, or Chris. I'm not sure which one of it is, John or Chris. If you're looking for some quality dog treats for your pets, they're good friends of mine, Top Dog Chews. Check them out online. This is not a paid post, but John and Chris Peritino were actually the first Zillow. That's who owns this company. They were the first people I ever sold a house to from Zillow, which used to be a huge lead source for us. The dollar is worth less, nothing coming up price. Are there literally three of us with a doctor as a prefect? It's John and Chris. So absolutely. They're not paying me to say this, but I used to buy stuff for my dog from them. I still do. Check them out. Are there three of us as doctors? Oh, I guess there are. But the real question is, I know you're not, Ian. Are any of you I don't know if DR is actually a doctor. Maybe he is. Maybe is it doctor? Have I been saying this wrong? DR, is it Dr. Detroit or DR Detroit? I've always said DR, but maybe it's doctor. I'd love to know if any three of you are actually doctors. Another issue with relocating to Northern Michigan is in terms of waterfront houses. Forever, you could work really hard, save a few bucks, do things the right way, and get to retirement age and buy a waterfront home in northern Michigan. And oh, before we get into that, I'm a microphone doctor. Okay, Dr. Detroit is a movie. Okay, I guess I need to get up on things. All right, back on the Ian's asking me what is in my can't I showed me at the beginning, so you must have missed it. It is strawberry Waterloo, one of my favorite flavors. All right, let's talk about waterfront real estate in northern Michigan. Forever waterfront real estate. If you did things right, save some money, you could find a lake whether you wanted to spend $200,000. I sold waterfront houses on small lakes in Sheboygan or Emma County for under $200,000. Can you believe that? Once upon a time. And it seemed like I remember when you could buy a house on Burt Lake. Now, it wasn't going to be a mansion. It wasn't going to be very big, but you could buy a house on Burt Lake, which is one of the nicer lakes up here, for $300,000, 250. I sold a house on Mullet Lake, which is a similar lake, $250,000. I sold, and this is going to sound crazy, but I sold a house that was a teardown on Walloon Lake for $900,000. Now you talk about Walloon Lake, the entry level there's $2.5 million, $3 million. Burt Lake, probably $1 million. Mullet Lake, maybe slightly less, maybe 800, maybe 700 in certain places. Waterfront in northern Michigan has gotten extremely expensive. Now, it's not something we talk about as much because there's a lot of rhetoric and there's a lot of news and media coverage around people that just can't find affordable housing because they live in northern Michigan, they work in northern Michigan, they can't afford to live in northern Michigan. Those people are going to get a lot of sympathy, as they should. But the person that can't afford to buy a waterfront home in northern Michigan is probably not going to get the same level of sympathy. However, that market has been hit just as hard as any other market, meaning the house that used to be $1 million on a lake is now $2 or $3 million. And there's a giant difference between buying $1 million house on the water or anywhere and buying a $3 million house, whether it's, the cost of the house, the cost of the taxes. And that is something that has really been definitely since COVID. I say this all the time, but COVID really shined a light on northern Michigan, meaning I don't think it's so much that properties are overvalued now. I think it's that they were undervalued compared to what you got in other areas with a high quality of life. And let me explain that a little bit. Before, northern Michigan used to be hard to get to. In fact, earlier in my career, and what's really nice about having been in this business for such a long time is I have some context. So early in my career, people buying in northern Michigan, were typically from Metro Detroit, 4 hours away, 3 hours away, the middle of the state, Saginaw, Bay City, Grand Rapids, maybe Chicago, Indiana, Ohio, but that was about the extent, just because it wasn't as convenient to fly here. And you're probably not going to have a second home that's more than a 6-hour drive away because it becomes too hard to get to. Now with what's going on with the Traverse City Airport, and I just flew out of there, a couple of weeks ago. That airport is making some major improvements. I just heard the Pellston Airport. So the Pellston Airport's about 20 minutes north of Petoskey. I typically don't fly out of there because the flight times are usually pretty sparse. It's getting better, but it used to be really expensive compared to just going to Traverse City and having a lot more options with time and that sort of thing. And forever, Pellston has been just Delta. If you've ever watched the show, the sitcom back in the day I watched when I was a kid, Wings, that's about the closest thing. That's about the closest airport you're ever going to find to the Pellston Airport, meaning they have a restaurant upstairs now. But it was like the guy that would check you in would do security and then also put your bag on the plane. And I'm not joking. That is 100% how the Pellston Airport works. But I just heard not only are they going to have Delta, they're going to get United now, which is going to really help the amount of flights they get. We talk about this all the time. I should bring it up again, but there's a news article that they're doing like a $20 million expansion onto the Traverse City Airport, which is already a growing airport. So I think that's going to really open up access to northern Michigan. And I cited an article a few lives ago that 97% of the people that travel through the Traverse City Airport are not tourists. They're people that live here. So suddenly, it's still a little bit, and I've had people, I met this guy last summer who was looking at Newport Beach, California. He lived in Lake Austin, Texas. He was looking at Newport Beach, California, and the houses there were like $10 million. He ended up buying a house in Bay Harbor for $2 million, sight unseen, and didn't know anything about the area, but just felt like it was such a discount compared to the other high quality areas. And I think you're going to see that. I think if you look at if you compare, and I talk about this a lot, if you compare the price of homes in northern Michigan to what they were 5, 10, 20 years ago, yes, they are very expensive. If you compare prices in Petoskey, Harbor Springs, Traverse City, Gaylord, Boyne City, any of the nice areas up here to the suburbs of Chicago, other resort communities, other coastal communities, we still stand pretty tall. Meaning, go onto Zillow, look across the country, look at the pricing index, and you can definitely see that this is the reason northern Michigan, the prices have gone up as much as they have. And it seems like every time in northern Michigan, specifically in Petoskey or Traverse City or some of the areas with a little bit lower inventory, every time I think, a house will come on the market and I'll think there's no way that house is going to sell for that price. And then it does, because there's still such limited inventory and there's still so many people trying to move here. And believe it or not, when it's time to move to Petoskey because you just sold your house or because you've decided that this is where you want to live, you're probably not going to squabble over 10% one way or the other. Now, there's definitely the school of people that want to maximize their budget and every dollar matters. But a lot of people, when they're buying a house, it costs what it costs and they want to live where they want to live. And they're not, they don't want to make a poor judgment or poor decision. But, I've had several people lately tell me, look, we're not buying this house to sell it in 2 or 3 years. We're going to be here for 10, 20 years, or we're going to be here until we pass away and then our kids are going to get it. So what we pay today, as long as we can afford it, it's not super important. And I also have a conversation, and I'll meet somebody and, that was buying a house 2 years ago and they were stressing about $10,000. And I see it on the street now and I'm like, hey, do you remember what you paid for your house? And they don't. And I often ask people if they remember what they paid for their house, and nobody ever does. Because when you're in northern Michigan and you're living the resort lifestyle year round and you're meeting friends and you're going to our cool restaurants and you're walking the beach, you're not going to care that you paid $10,000 one way or the other. Maybe you will, and maybe I'm just trying to stretch you because I'm a greedy realtor, but I ultimately believe in quality of life, and sometimes, it's worth a few extra bucks. The cost of building a custom home on a waterfront Elk Lake is also very high. You could easily, yeah, that's 100% true. Jim, thanks for Jim Dreyer. There are so many. Elk Lake. I could sit here. I could do a whole episode. Maybe I will. I could do a whole live I could probably do 5 whole lives on the quality waterfront in northern Michigan. That is something, if you're not familiar with northern Michigan or you're just getting introduced and that has brought you to my channel, the quality of waterfront in northern Michigan is bar none. We have the Great Lakes. If you like the big water, we have, huge inland lakes like Burt Lake, Mullet Lake, even down to Houghton Lake. We've got the small, historic, prestigious lakes like Walloon Lake, where Ernest Hemingway grew up. Lake Charlevoix, you can have a boat in your backyard and travel anywhere in the world. Elk Lake, you have the Torch Lake, you got the chain of lakes over there. There's just some tremendous waterfront. We should do a live from Torch. If you can help me figure out how to get Dewan to mount this stuff to your boat, we can do a live from Torch for sure. The remote worker migration has definitely changed the dynamic. I was actually, Sam Bailey, who is an economist or a statistician with the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance. He was on a live. I should have him back on for an update. He was talking about how many people have relocated to northern Michigan, yet the overall workforce has increased by almost nothing. And what does that mean? Why would an area have such an increase in population, but not have an increase in workforce? And I think there's a couple of things. One, a lot of retirees. The definition of retiree is you don't work anymore. So a lot of people do choose to retire in northern Michigan. We have great hospitals. Hard to blame them for that. Also, a lot of the people relocating here do not work in northern Michigan. And it's, again, something we talk about all the time. It's created a really interesting, is for lack of a better word, dynamic of, in order to live in northern Michigan, you can't work in northern Michigan and afford to live in northern Michigan, which is obviously creating a little bit of a conundrum and definitely hurt the overall well-being. Now we talk about they're building some great rental units. There's 200, 300, 400 units, apartment units coming on to the market in Petoskey. Traverse City's got a bunch of subdivisions. At some point, again, as John and Chris asked about the cost of building, it'd be nice if one day, and I don't know if this is possible, but if one day the equilibrium between the cost of build and what those houses would sell for, and also giving the builders, a reasonable rate of return. I wish we could find a kumbaya and all of that would happen, but as of today, that seems like it's in the distant future, if at best. And again, I'm just genuinely curious what happens. And I can't, again, I come on here to be honest with you, and I'll probably tell you a little bit more behind the scenes than other realtors will, because I think that's a good way to build trust. And I feel that honesty is the best policy. I would say 25% of our buyers, people that call me that from wherever, I'll get a message, a text, an email. Hey, Gino, we're excited about moving to Northern Michigan. Love to talk to you. Great. Set them up on a search, get them pre-approved, get in the car, take them out and show them houses. And then they decide to buy in Southeast Michigan, Southwest Michigan, out of state. And oftentimes I can't blame them, because depending on what is important to you, if all that is really important to you is I want X house to look like this, I want this house with this amenities for this price, Northern Michigan can be challenging within certain budgets. And that's heartbreaking. And I'm not taking that lightly. I wish it weren't like that. In fact, it would make my life a lot easier if that weren't the case. The people that we do find that end up paying the price or paying the premium to live in Northern Michigan typically have a high income, just being honest, sold the house, so they have a ton of equity, or they're bringing a lot of money with them, or they have some significant tie to the area. So not only are they buying a house, but they're buying mom and dad living down the road, their grandparents living down the road, their sister living down the road. And that is sometimes, you can't put a price tag on that. And those are the types of people that we are seeing relocate to Northern Michigan. Frank V says, I live on the water up here. If anybody's looking for water, we're probably plan on spending $1 million plus, especially in nice areas. 100% Frank is spot on. I should do a live on, I think I'm going to make a note of this. I want to do a live on what type of waterfront home. I'm going to write down waterfront live. I'm going to do a live specifically on waterfront homes, telling you what you get for each price point, and then give you a couple of options. I don't know how many of you are watching this because you're interested in living on the water, you're curious about living on the water, but waterfront homes always seem to be a compelling topic, whether people plan to live there or not. They love to hear about them. They love to see them. So that is definitely something you can check out. Again, if you're hopping on late, my name is Gino D'Angelo. I'm a local Northern Michigan real estate agent. Every Thursday at 7 p.m., rain or shine, as long as I have internet, we come on here live to answer your questions about Northern Michigan real estate, what's going on here, any developments, any news, answer any questions you might have. I publish a video every week going over hidden gems, what towns to consider, what towns not to consider, where you should live. I try to give you the honest, not Chamber of Commerce approach of what it's like to live in Northern Michigan. That way you can decide if it's the right choice for you. And these videos have helped a lot of people decide that they do want to live in Northern Michigan, and they probably helped even more decide they don't want to live in Northern Michigan. Sean Gable, hey, Age. I think you meant to say Gino. Can you recommend any furniture stores in the area? Absolutely. What's it called? There's one in Traverse City that I love, Value City. I've got a great contact there. If you need it, reach out to me. That is one thing. Depending on the type of furniture you want, this is another issue with Petoskey. Traverse City has Ian Way in. They've got Value City, Fowler's, a couple of other Golden Fowler. I mean, it's Golden Fowler. They've got some like middle of the road furniture stores. Petoskey used to have an art van. When those closed, that really shut down the furniture market in Petoskey. There is a new one that just opened. I want to say it's called Little Traverse Furniture. That's in kind of where Art Van used to be. Furniture stores in Northern Michigan can be, I think Value City is a great alternative. They've got high-end stuff, media of the road, affordable stuff. I think that's a great option. I will tell you, unless you want to spend a lot of money on furniture in the Petoskey, Harbor Springs, Gaylord area, I would plan on, getting it from Costco or getting it someplace, Wayfair or someplace online. It's typically what I've heard a lot of my clients tell me that they've done. No, that's a great question. And that is something that I should address in my videos more, because sometimes I think the things that are the most important to the people watching are a certain thing. And then I get a question that I should probably do some more content about buying furniture stores in the area. From retirees to young families, that is definitely something we're seeing in Northern Michigan. Again, this is very similar to what we were just talking about. It seems like the average age in this area is going up, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I have said, and again, this is just my attempt to be honest. I have had younger families say, I wish more younger families were moving into the area. Not that they're not, because they are, but it's just not at the same rate of other demographics of the population. Ian says, Value City, which is much nicer than the name sounds. It is. Value City's a goofy name. I mean, I'm sure they know more than I do about naming, but I do think that's a goofy name. Golden Fellow for sure. And then the unique stuff like, yeah, Woodland Creek Furniture. That's like, if you're buying a log cabin, that is like specialty wood stuff. It is very expensive, very high-end storage. Yeah. A lot of high-end stores. Value City, if you're looking for like an art van, like Ethan Allen, like Ashley, like that kind of furniture store, I think Value City is great. And I've got a good contact there who will come into your house. We actually had a house that somebody bought as a short-term rental. She drove to their house in Boyne City from Traverse City with them on the phone and helped them design the whole thing. And I think she gave them a pretty good price. So food for thought. Population booms. That is something that has definitely changed, which has something to consider when debating if Northern Michigan is the right fit for you or not. It's a lot busier in some of these areas, specifically Traverse City, Petoskey, Gaylord, because they've just grown so much. Gaylord, Gaylord, if you're looking for bang for your buck, I still think Gaylord is one of the best places to look. We sold a couple houses there lately, and the people that we sold them to were tremendously happy with the value they got from them. It's busier. In the summer, traffic's a little busier. It's harder to get a reservation at your favorite restaurant. It's just busier. Now, some people have told me that helps them feel like they're living in a bigger area than they actually are. Some people like the busyness, but if busy isn't your thing, or it really bothers you to have to make reservations at your favorite restaurant, and even the population swing, it goes from super busy to quiet very quickly. And I've had people tell me that have moved here that's something they had to get used to. It's really all I know. It's something we've always experienced, but definitely something to consider if relocating to Northern Michigan. Something else to consider is internet. For a long time, internet was a big reason people did not relocate to Northern Michigan. They needed high-speed internet for their work. They needed it for their lifestyle. They wanted to play video games or watch Netflix. Northern Michigan has done a really good job of bringing fiber optic internet everywhere. In fact, my house east of Indian River out in the country has better internet than I do in my office in downtown Petoskey, just because it's fiber optic. It was installed later on than this, which technology is everything in that world. So yeah, internet has come a long ways, which again ties back to, it seems like every road ends with people coming here to work remotely, but has definitely made working remote a lot easier. Because imagine this, you work for a huge company in Nashville, Tennessee, but you do so from the comfort of your cabin in the middle of the woods where you can watch the deer versus, watching the expressway outside of your window in a major metropolitan area. I will say something that keeps coming up, and I don't have a way to dial into this as much as I would like. A lot of the remote work jobs, a lot of those workers are being called back into the office. I see that on the news. I don't know if it's a big enough deal that it's going to affect people living here or not. Did they ever find the Petoskey internet generator thief? No, my guess is it's the same person that stole your speaker at the downtown open house a couple of years ago. So they're probably using the generator to fool your speaker to play wild music. So what Ian's referring to is there was a big news story that we had internet, and so a lot of us got power back, but we didn't get internet back right away. And then we got it back and then went out again. And everybody's like, well, how'd that happen? And I guess it was running on a generator and somebody stole the generator, because why not? That's what people do in crisis, is steal the generator that is causing a lot of us to have internet. So a little bit of a funny story there. Make sure you drop your questions. We're talking about a lot of things tonight. A lot of reasons why you should move to Northern Michigan, you shouldn't move to Northern Michigan, answering the question if you should or should not move to Northern Michigan. Look, Northern Michigan is not for everybody. I did a video recently that I talked about whether, if I was relocating to Northern Michigan today, if I would pick Petoskey again or not. And I don't know. I think it's gotten expensive. I do think it's a really high quality of life. I think there's some good and some bad about being here. It's definitely a lot different. But Northern Michigan, Petoskey specifically, is definitely a lot different than when I relocated here. But I still think I would choose it again and again. It just probably be a little bit different of a conversation just because it has gotten so expensive. Healthcare is always being upgraded in Northern Michigan. If you're thinking about moving here because you're retiring, I think that's a great idea. There are few places better to retire, in my opinion, than Northern Michigan, but make sure you check out the local hospitals. We've got McLaren, which I think does a great job. There's basically two hospital systems in Northern Michigan, McLaren and Munson. They both do a tremendous job. If you do need some specialty care, you definitely have Traverse City or Ann Arbor or DeVos if it's a children's health issue. So in this region, there really is some great health. The Mayo Clinic, if you have something serious, the Cleveland Clinic, those are all within striking distance. So I always say this, for an area to have a lot of people relocating, you need to have a good hospital to attract retirees, and you need to have a good school system to attract families. This area has both of those. I guess the third thing should be the ability to work remotely. That's my third caveat that I should start adding to this conversation. The ability to work remotely. Those three things are fundamentally why people are relocating to Northern Michigan. But it's like the airport. The hospital is good, but it's not a metropolitan area good, meaning the Traverse City Airport is never going to be as good as the Detroit Airport. I don't think. The healthcare is never going to be as expansive as it is in metro areas, because that is just how it goes sometimes. And when you get more people, there's just an economy of scale that allows you to cover more things. I really wonder, well, I was going through my notes to talk about what to consider. I really wonder, this ice storm that we're just getting through and we're on the tail end of it, although there are still some people that don't have power. This ice storm, I think, is going to make some people not relocate. This ice storm is going to make people reconsider Northern Michigan. It was a doozy. I mean, there are people without power. There's a girl that runs the front desk, or she's like the secretary of my son's school. They just got power back after 2 weeks. Not having power for 2 weeks. Now, look, I know people in Florida go through hurricanes. I know there's earthquakes, way worse natural disasters than an ice storm, but I don't want to diminish what a lot of the people in Northern Michigan went through. And I really hope we all learned a lesson, meaning, maybe before you go buy that hot tub to put on your back deck to sit in, maybe you allocate that money and buy a generator instead, because a good whole house generator is $10,000, $15,000, which sounds like a lot of money until it's the difference between you having power for 2 weeks or not one time, meaning, we lose power for half a day, somewhat common. We've never lost it for this long. And I really hope this isn't a trend. And I hope that all the trees that were going to fall down actually did fall down, so we don't have to go through this again. But that's definitely something to think about. Something else to consider when deciding if Northern Michigan in 2025 is right for you or not is what's going on here. Now, there's certainly a lot more activities going on in Northern Michigan than there was, not that long ago. There's the Pittsburghers baseball team, which is a great way to experience. It's not pro baseball, but it's very similar. There's lots of arts at the, Great Lakes Center for the Arts in Petoskey, Crooked Tree, Gaylord has some stuff going on. Boyne City, there's stuff to do here. We've got all the county fairs and all that sort of stuff that they always bring in, concerts and stuff to check out. But it's not like having Little Caesars or Amway in your backyard that every single night there's a new big act that you can watch. So that is definitely something to consider. Some people do feel that although there has been a lot of improvements in Northern Michigan, that it still just doesn't have the same feel that it always has, and that it's changing, and that it's becoming a little bit too big. Now, I personally don't experience that. I'd like to see some of these projects that have one of my pet peeves in Petoskey is when you drive around right now, there's a lot of half-finished projects. Now, I know we've had the storm and we've had supply shortages and labor shortages and that sort of thing, but I really hope some of these hotels that are being built, some of these apartment buildings, and a lot of them are, but there are a couple that have been under construction for a while, and it really makes you wonder what's going to happen. There's some vacancies from some storefronts in downtown. It seems like there's some stores closing sort of frequently these days. It just really makes me curious of what the next 5 years looks like in Northern Michigan. The last question I want to answer is, I asked myself this: will Northern Michigan still be livable in 2030, which is 5 years from now? I think the answer is yes. And I think resoundingly, it will be more livable than it is today. I feel like if prices are going to come down, they're about to. Interest rates are going to come down sometime, whether it's this year, next year. I do think by 2030, now look, I'm one of the people that, I'm 41, and I saw this meme on Instagram the other day that was talking about how many different life-changing events have happened in my 40 years. So, we went through not that the ice storm and COVID are the same thing, but they were, certainly disruptive events. barring something crazy happening in the next 5 years, which I wouldn't, with the world we live in now, who knows? I think by 2030, Northern Michigan is going to have found its place. And I think we're going to have a much better understanding of what Northern Michigan is. I think by then, a couple of these big variables, the short-term rental situation will be figured out by them. I feel like it will have found its equilibrium. I think the remote remote workers will also find their equilibrium. When interest rates drop, the price of houses go up. I agree with that. I just don't, and Ian, you can weigh in on this because I know you're watching and you're the expert on mortgage rates. I think it's marginal. I don't know when they dropped from whatever 6, 7 to 3, that caused prices to spike. I don't know that they're going to drop enough to make the prices spike again. And I think that's a good thing because I think we need to find our balance. I think we'll see demand increase, but we will see a large increase in supply. Yeah, I agree with that too. And look, interest rates going down. I've got a perspective on this that you may not be considering. I think when interest rates going down, I agree that in a vacuum, it's logical to think that prices are going to go up. I also think it will open up some inventory, which may hold out those prices steady, meaning it's going to unlock a lot of these people that are frozen. Meaning there are people now that have a $400,000 or $500,000 house that would love to buy a $700,000 house. They just can't trade their $400,000 house with a 3% interest rate for a $700,000 house with a 6% interest rate. So I do think when that gap to move up, which the move up buyer really fuels a lot of the market, when the gap to move up shrinks, I think it's going to unlock a lot of inventory, which could keep prices under control. Now, look, I could be wrong and way out in left field, and I will keep doing these lives. That way you will know exactly what is going on. So, we're about to hit the top of the hour. I've got a client call at the end of this at 8 o'clock because that is the time of season we're in. I'm telling you, if you're thinking about, make sure if you have any questions before I hop off, you drop them in the comments. If you want to stay up to date with what's going on, make sure you follow genosguide.com. It's a newsletter that I put out twice a month. It tells, I just went to the new Italian restaurant that opened up. It was phenomenal. There's going to be a little blurb about that. It talks about some housing, some of our new listings, some things going on in the market, some content we're making. So genosguide.com, make sure you sign up for it. It's great. If you sign up and you don't like it, you're more than welcome to unsubscribe, but it's a great way to keep an eye of what's going on. I think right now, Jim Dreyer said, nice show. Enjoy your information. Thank you so much for watching. If there's anything you want to learn more about or anything you wish I would talk about, I feel like I know as much as there is to know about Northern Michigan real estate. I just need to know what is important to you. That way I can tailor these conversations around that based on what we're seeing right now. And that's why I love these lives, because I can tell you what is going on today, not a week ago, not a month ago, not a year ago. A lot of times when you start looking at content, it just gets outdated so quickly. So our attempt is always to make the content as evergreen as possible. But with that being said, as of today, what I'm seeing today, meaning 3 hours ago when I was in the office after this, there are some deals out there. Now, if you want to insider tip, the way to find the best deal on a house, go on to Zillow, look for the houses that have been on the market for 100 days or more. Those are the opportunity for you to get a deal on a house, because typically those people want to sell. Maybe they got bad advice from the realtor. Maybe they overpriced it, but the market is not kind to those people, meaning that is your opportunity to get houses below asking price. Conversely, if you're watching this because you're either going to sell in Northern Michigan or you're going to sell someplace else to move to Northern Michigan and you're on the seller side, my advice is the same thing. Make sure you keep that days on market low, because the days on market is the enemy of value. And as a buyer or seller, it's either your friend or your enemy. Meaning as a seller, only being on the market a couple of days is a good thing. But once you get to 30 days, 60 days, 90 days on market, the first thing a buyer is going to think is this house is overpriced. And when I'm talking about making an offer with somebody, the first thing they bring up, one of the first questions they ask is, how long has this house been on the market for? And their offer is based that the days on market definitely influences the amount that they're going to offer. So that is your advice for the night. Thank you so much. If you're watching this live, thank you for being here. If you're watching the replay, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the notification. I do these every Thursday at 7 o'clock, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, same time.